Engamana, engareo, ro rakatira ma, tanakoto, tanatato katoa. Good evening, everyone. My name is Harlene Hain, and I have the great privilege of being the Vice Chancellor here at the University of Otago. And it is my pleasure to welcome each and every one of you to this inaugural professorial lecture for Professor Chris Button. These lectures are always a time of celebration for us here at the university because it gives us all the opportunity to take just an hour out of our incredibly busy schedule to just really sit and listen to the brilliance that is a University of Otago professor. It's fantastic to see so many people here to celebrate this incredibly important milestone in Chris's career. On behalf of the university, I would like to extend a particularly warm welcome to members of Chris's family who are here to support him this evening. His wife, Angela, his daughter, Melanie, his mum, Bronwyn, who is here from Devon, and his mum-in-law, Sue, who is here from Wales. To the four fantastic women in Chris's life, Nomai, Haramai, welcome. I'd also like to acknowledge the presence of academic and professional staff from throughout the university and members of the wider Dunedin community who are also here to support this fantastic event. Now, the path to professor here at the University of Otago is not an easy one, and it's probably an interesting coincidence that we are having this IPL on the eve of the next professorial selection panel, which convenes tomorrow. So in order to receive this promotion to professor, the individual applicant must demonstrate excellence in teaching, in research, and in service to the university and the wider community. Now, as you will learn from Chris's lecture this evening, he is an effective and motivating teacher, a very popular postgraduate supervisor, and an incredibly successful researcher. Professor Button has also provided exceptional service to his department, to the university, and to the wider research community. So, Chris, it is genuinely my pleasure to congratulate you on your very well-deserved promotion to professor. I will now call on the Pro-Vice Chancellor of Sciences, Professor Richard Barker, who will tell us just a little bit more about Chris's journey to professor. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.
Vice Chancellor, tēnā koe. Deputy Vice Chancellors, tēnā koutou. Professor Button, tēnā koe. Professor Hodge, tēnā koe. Friends and colleagues, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. It is my great pleasure tonight to introduce our speaker, Professor Chris Button, to give his inaugural professorial lecture at the University of Otago. Come on in. As was indicated by our Vice-Chancellor, Professor Button is one of our newer professors at the University of Otago, receiving a well-deserved promotion to the position in February of this year. Chris grew up in a town called Honiton in the southwest of England, and with parents who were both teachers and a father, Des, who was a PE teacher, we can guess where Chris's interest in sport and exercise began, and football. We might also guess that this is where his gift for teaching comes from. Ever the pioneer, on finishing school, Chris travelled north to Manchester Metropolitan University, where he studied a relatively new degree at the time, a BSc with honours in exercise and sport science. He funded this working in nearby Chester at Britain's oldest wine merchant business. As an interesting aside, such was his passion for matters of the grape, he completed a postgraduate diploma in wine and spirit education at Liverpool University, and he added a note about the immense amount of practical work that went into that. Graduating with his honours degree in 1995, Chris stayed on in Manchester to complete his PhD on motor learning, which he did so in 2000, having also worked as a lecturer from 1998. More importantly, at about this time, Chris wrote this. He met his wife-to-be, Angela, who was also studying for her PhD in sports psychology and talent development. Post-PhD, Chris and Angela moved further north, Chris taking up employment as a senior lecturer at the University of Edinburgh. They both enjoyed life north of the border with the incredible scenery and outdoor activities on offer, so it seems natural that Chris was enticed to Dunedin for more of the same, to take up the directorship of the Human Performance Centre, which he did so in 2002. With 4 books, 17 book chapters and 92 peer-reviewed journal articles, Professor Button is a highly productive researcher. And I'm proud to say that sitting at number 42 in his CV is a journal article that I helped Chris write back in 2011. His research interests are in the field of motor learning, specifically the issue of water safety education, which he will tell us a little bit more about in a few minutes. As noted by the Vice-Chancellor, Professor Button's promotion reflects much more than his personal scholarship. He is also an outstanding teacher and leader. At the postgraduate level, he is currently supervising 6 PhD students and has supervised 13 to completion. He has also supervised 6 MPhil students to completion and mentored 5 postdocs. His undergraduate teaching has been translated into 3 books on motor learning pedagogy. But my final remarks, if I may, are on Chris as a leader. He was appointed Dean of the School of Physical Education, Sport and Exercise Science in 2017. He came in at a challenging time, but he was chosen for the role because of his personal qualities, which were seen as necessary to lead the school into the next phase of its history. He has thus far risen to the challenge, and under Chris's leadership, the school is continuing to position itself as a centre of excellence in sport and exercise science, as it were, building on the strong foundations of the old and establishing the new. Tonight, the focus will be on his journey of personal scholarship from Honiton in the north to Dunedin in the south. Please join me in welcoming Professor Chris Button.
Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Tēnā koe, Vice-Chancellor. Tēnā koe, Pro-Vice-Chancellor. Tēnā koe, members of the academic party. Tēnā koutou. Ko Chris Button, aho. No Devon Ingarangi, aho. Ko te manakora o te kora parawhakawai, aho. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. Tēnā tātou katoa. And to all my family, friends and colleagues gathered here, both physically and virtually, a warm thank you for attending and enjoying, hopefully, this little shindig for the next 45 minutes. It's my intention to try and entertain you, and for those brave souls who are live streaming from the UK right now, I'll be doing my best to try to keep you awake, because it's a ridiculously early time in the morning back there. My name is Chris Button, and I have the honour, as Richard has just said, of being the Dean of the School of Physical Education, Sport and Exercise Sciences. If I was to ask each of you the question, what do you think about when you recall physical education? I bet a fair amount of my hard-earned salary that the most common response would be, running around a gym or a field whilst being shouted at by my teacher. I hope to convince you over the next half an hour or so that physical education is and can be so much more than that outdated viewpoint. Like our fingerprints, movement defines us uniquely as individuals. Across our lifespan, humans move in a wide variety of different ways to fulfill task goals. We move to feed, we move to play, we move to communicate, to travel, to work, and to relax. How we learn movement and how we learn motor skills has been the focus of my research for just over 20 years. The remarkable capacity that humans possess to learn, to be taught, to remember, and to adapt to their environments has served our species well for millions of years. Do you think you're fit? Interestingly, from an evolutionary biology perspective, the word fitness doesn't refer to how fast you can run or how far you can go, but instead to how well we as a species exploit the environmental niches that are offered to us, hence the well-known saying, survival of the fittest. Hence, humans are among the fittest living species on Earth because of our capacity to adapt. Regardless of our ethnicity, socioeconomic status, and our physical education, which actually begins many years before we set foot in a school and arguably never ends, we can open up a rich landscape of opportunities should we choose to accept them. So do you think that society is changing the way that we move? Emerging technological advances such as the internet, social media, wearable sensing devices, virtual reality are all very much on our doorsteps, if not already here. These simultaneously enhance the capacity for us to explore our environments and learn new skills, whilst at the same time providing distractions and potential barriers to physical activity. An important question I'd like us all to consider is whether our physical educations are still relevant for the future that lies ahead of us. And in this talk, I'm going to use the specific example of water safety education in New Zealand to further explore that question. Let's rewind the clock to one of the most crucial periods of our lives, acquiring so-called foundational movement skills. From approximately the ages of 4 to 8 years old, as my daughter Melanie here is demonstrating, forms the building blocks upon which more complex movement skills can be constructed as we mature. So movement or motor competence is a child's capacity to move both effectively and efficiently. Motor competence plays a pivotal role in the physical and psychological well-being of children during development. Although we can learn new skills at any point in our lives, our capacity to learn is greatest in our childhood, and that's manifested by the highest rate of neural plasticity relative to other phases in our lives. Hence, while it's never too late to learn a skill such as kicking a ball or learning to swim, it's certainly easier and maybe advisable to do it when we're still young. I'm glad to say that Melanie has selectively learnt how to kick a ball here, rather than how not to wear her shorts like her dad does in this clip. You might ask the question, well, does it matter that young children learn to move well or competently? And the answer to that is a clear yes, it does matter for several reasons. Children with poor motor competency are less likely to be active during childhood, but also throughout adulthood. Also, children with poor motor competence are more likely to be excluded from social groups or even be bullied, and they may have lower self-esteem. As I will discuss in a few slides' time, not being able to swim or recreate safely in water at a young age is a sad and worrying trend around the world, and particularly in an island nation like this one. Emerging data from across the world suggests that children's movement competency in general is decreasing. And here's one example drawn from a very large body of literature, which contrasts children from our neighbours Australia with Belgian children. Alarmingly, close to 40% of Australian children showed very poor motor competency in a range of skills like running, jumping, catching, throwing and kicking. And as I highlighted here in the abstract of this article, the authors suggest that the very low levels of movement competency reported by Australian children may be the result of cultural differences in physical activity contexts, such as physical education and active transport. When compared to norm scores, both samples, the Belgian and Australian children, scored significantly worse than children 40 years ago. Hence, the decline in children's motor competence is a global issue, and it's one that's largely influenced, according to these authors, by increasing sedentary behaviour and a decline in physical activity. In recent years, motor competency has been linked with the broader, multi-dimensional concept of physical literacy. This model, which was published just this year, a few months ago, links the concept of physical literacy, acquired early in childhood, to other important developmental factors, including environment, social factors, and individual differences. The model suggests that acquiring physical literacy in childhood is an integral part of a healthy and active lifestyle. Several studies in the last couple of decades have shown some of these relationships to be true and to be confirmed. They demonstrate, for example, poor motor competency in childhood with less physical activity both in childhood and then later in life, and some of the negative associated health risks that come with that, such as obesity, diabetes, and poor mental health. So this is data from across the world, but what about from here? How do our Kiwi children stack up? And the reality is that there isn't a lot of data that's New Zealand specific to rely upon, certainly in regards to movement competency. However, we can look to the amount and the quality of physical activity that children get up to. And we have some information here that's collected from Sport New Zealand on a fairly regular basis. And they've been collecting and monitoring self-reported data from New Zealand children for several years. What this slide tells us is that on average, children's weekly activity levels rise until around about the age of 12 to 14, with approximately 11 hours a week of sport, play, and other forms of physical activity reported. 11 hours a week. If we assume that children sleep for 12 hours per day, which is a conservative assumption, I would say, for some parents in the audience here, then these data suggest that children are active for only about 13% of the time that they're not sleeping. The pie chart on the right here depicts how that 11 hours of physical activity is expended. I'd like to draw your attention to the two largest slices of pie. About 4 of these 11 hours are spent playing with family and friends, demonstrating the importance of a good social network around children, encouraging them to be active. And just over 2 hours per week on average are spent in physical activity or PE lessons at school. Perhaps because of some of these worrying data, New Zealand children have been targeted by the government here with something called the physical literacy approach. So the government recognised back in 2016 that New Zealand children do seem to have decreasing levels of physical activity and increasing amounts of screen time, sat in front of devices or computers or TVs. And this concerning trend has actually been confirmed by Sandy Mandich and her team here in the School of Physical Education. So over $8 million worth of funding has been injected into this physical literacy program, and that's primarily been through Sport New Zealand, supported by the Ministry of Education and ACC. The vision of the physical literacy approach, as you can see here, is to value and choose to be physically active for life. It's worth again highlighting that physical activity is a multi-dimensional concept. It's not just being about physical. A range of dimensions here, including cognitive, spiritual, social, and emotional benefits to human movement that should not be overshadowed by that physical dimension. This holistic approach to physical literacy is also represented when we consider the Ministry of Education's recommendations for the New Zealand school curriculum. For at least 20 years now, health and physical education have been taught together, and they encompass 3 different but related subjects: health education, physical education, and home economics. So these subjects share a conceptual framework and achievement objectives, as depicted in the slide here by a very nice interwoven tapestry. The 7 key areas of learning that are listed here are interwoven through 4 strands, namely haora, health promotion, the socio-ecological perspective, and attitudes and values. Just take a moment to look at some of these key areas of learning. Do you think they're important? I think they're about as important as they could possibly be. And when one considers the significance of each of these learning areas for developing children, it might be argued that health and physical education as a subject area bears considerable weight upon its shoulders. How broad are the shoulders of health and phys ed? The school curriculum is packed with numerous important learning topics. But does health and phys ed get a fair share? There's considerable variation across schools, but 2 to 3 lessons per week would be the typical load, and at least that's through primary and intermediate schools. One might question whether, for example, 2 to 3 PE lessons per week is enough, and also whether health and physical education should be a mandatory topic throughout high school. I certainly have views on that, and you can probably guess what they are. Perhaps another contentious topic is the convenient linking together, not of my internet, is the convenient linking together of health and physical education within the school curriculum. In my honest opinion, there's actually a lot to be gained from the cross-disciplinary study of health, wellness, and physical education. Indeed, if I've done one thing in the School of Physical Education here over the last couple of years, it's to really promote and try to include those cross-disciplinary linkages in our new curriculum. And it's something that I believe the school has prospered for over 70 years in terms of its philosophy. Is health and PE taught well? Well, the reality, from my perspective, having looked at a few different schools and chosen one recently for Melanie, is that schools generally do a pretty good job with physical education, whereas others maybe don't give it sufficient emphasis within their curriculum. There's a fair amount of variation. From the limited perspective of the Dunedin schools that I've been to and some of the PE teachers that I've spoken to, on the whole, I've been quite impressed by the range, the quality, and the amount of physical education that's offered to children. But as I said in the slide, it's not just about how much phys ed you provide for students, you've got to teach it well. Let's just take a look at a typical lesson, and this is from a class in Singapore. The 10-year-old girls here are beginning learners, and they're being taught, as you can see, how to play tennis strokes. Notice the mechanical, technique-focused way in which the teacher is getting them to replicate certain types of movement pattern. Analysis of physical education lessons around the world suggests that PE teachers do tend to favour and adopt these direct styles of teaching that include a high level of instruction, demonstration, and corrective feedback. For example, a recent study in Europe found that approximately 80% of typical PE lessons were taught predominantly in this fashion. And you might say, well, maybe there are good reasons for that. Direct teaching styles like these help to organize and control big groups. I think there was 30 to 40 children in that group there. It's perhaps safe to teach in this way. We know what they're all doing. They're all trying to do the same thing. They're not hopefully going to hit each other, nicely spaced apart. Maybe it's done to ensure that physical activity is undertaken by all. One size fits all is commonly used when people talk about physical education. A much smaller percentage of lessons involve indirect teaching styles, styles that allow the children to play and to learn to solve problems by themselves. And this is an area that I would like to spend a little bit of time talking to you about. But as I say, bear in mind that what we typically see in physical education and the way that that topic is taught, these types of approaches. So in recent years, myself and a few colleagues have been working on a new approach to teaching phys ed, which is much more individual focused as opposed to reproducing a certain type of technique. When adopting a non-linear pedagogy approach, physical education teachers must consider a few things. They must consider the key constraints on the learner. The learner at the center of this model is the important person, and each individual brings with them different attributes and qualities. Key constraints shape how people move. Things such as the equipment that you give them, the instructions that you provide them, and their motivations shape the way that they prefer to move. Phys ed teachers will be well advised to try to be aware of some of these key constraints on learners. Attentional focus, or what learners pay attention to when they're practicing, is very influential in terms of the quality of their learning. So, for example, should your attention be directed internally to guiding your limb as you're moving a tennis racket through the air? In terms of your posture, should you be thinking about how to control your balance? Or instead, should you be thinking externally about the effects of your action on the environment, where the ball is and where you'd like to place it? So this is attentional focus, and it's something that was known to be fairly important for learning. Information movement coupling is developing close linkages between the information that's available in the environment, like an approaching ball, and how the human body couples movements to receive that ball, to control it, and then to move it in a functional way. Many species of animals are very good at information movement coupling, just like humans. But this is something, again, which maybe is downplayed a little bit in some of these physical education lessons. Finally, and importantly, nonlinear pedagogy emphasizes something known as representativeness, as you can see in the model. Representative learning design is where teachers look to carefully design their practice environment so that it mimics or simulates the performance environment to which the skill should eventually be reproduced. Indeed, this theoretically informed pedagogical approach has informed some of my most recent research looking at how children should learn water safety skills. And I'd like to share that with you now. In 2015, a nationwide study into aquatic education for schools was conducted by the New Zealand Council for Education Research. The study found that only about a quarter of schools, 27% to be precise, provided a minimum acceptable combination of 8 or more water-based lessons of about half an hour duration per year. Whilst somewhat shocking, in fact, this statistic is probably an underestimate, because based on sector knowledge, Water Safety New Zealand advocates the minimum should be, in fact, 10 lessons of at least 30 minutes. Let's briefly return to the health and physical education curriculum, where the following guidance is given to schools. It is expected that all students will have had opportunities to learn basic aquatic skills by the end of Year 6, age 11. Do they achieve that or not? Well, the data from this report suggests maybe not. How and where these opportunities happen is left to the discretion of the schools. Of course, some schools have ready access to a pool and teachers who are qualified maybe to deliver aquatics. But the reality is that a growing number of schools don't have these privileges. Other important results that emerged from this review included that schools need to adopt perhaps a more consistent national approach to aquatics education. They need more schools that are meeting this recommended minimum of lessons. And greater emphasis is needed on teaching survival skills alongside teaching children the traditional swimming strokes. And finally, and most importantly for the project I'm about to talk to you about, the majority of teaching occurs in swimming pools with very little exposure to other environments. Recall what I said about representative learning design and the importance of mimicking the environment in which you intend to perform that skill in. It's important because we know that more children and teenagers drown in open water than in pools. A tragic statistic, in New Zealand recently over 80% of preventable drownings were in open water environments. We know, and that's been the case for many years now, that New Zealand has one of the highest fatality records for drowning amongst developed countries. It's well known that the majority of drownings happen not in pools, but in open water environments. So one of the focuses of my research recently has been to try to encourage us to consider where we might teach and educate children, because clearly there are numerous differences between open water environments and swimming pools. And here's a few of them. You might recognize this image from Dunedin. So open water environments, if we're at the beach or the ocean, we have to deal with things like waves and currents. If we're maybe in a river, we have to deal with cold temperatures over here in New Zealand. It's commonly the case. We have to deal with depths of water that may be unpredictable, difficult to read, multiple entry and exit points. In contrast to swimming pools, which are almost the exact opposite, where we have supervision, we have a sterile environment, the water's clean, you can see through it usually, and there are various rules about what you can and you can't do in that environment. So certainly there are very big differences between open water and swimming pool environments. Assuming that it's difficult to simulate and recreate some of these features in swimming pools, I wanted to see whether it was possible and indeed more effective to teach children aquatic skills in open water. So, in a recent project I ran here with Professor Jim Cotter and Associate Professor Anne-Marie Jackson, we've been asking the question, is it more effective to teach water competency skills to children in open water environments? So quite recently, we took 120 children from Dunedin, and some of them are here tonight, from the ages of 7 to 11 years old, and we recruited them in world record time, less than 2 weeks, thanks to the wonders of Facebook. It's not good for many things, but it's very good for recruiting participants. We had 120 children performing 3 different tests in a swimming pool, and in between those tests, we had them participate in an educational program in different environments. So we had them go down to the Otago harbour and spend a morning or an afternoon working with some lifeguards. We had them go to a local river and understand and experience what it's like to be immersed in a river. And we also had them go down to a local beach. And this is footage taken from, as you can see, wonderful Brighton Beach on a sunny day. I don't know how we managed to find some sunshine. It was in the middle of January, so you can see a beautiful environment here for the children to be engaged in. The children had a range of competencies to begin with. Some were good, some were not so good. And you can tell we had quite a few lifeguards and different organisations involved with their supervision to make sure that things were safe. But we practiced a range of different skills. Immersion, you saw submersion there, floating on their backs, and just being competent and confident in these environments. So this formed the basis of our educational programme. And we were really interested to see to what extent it would improve their competency in some key core skills. The 6 water safety skills that were tested were getting in and out of deep water and floating for up to 5 minutes without touching the sides or the bottom or without grabbing onto someone. They needed to be able to fit a life jacket and simulate a rescue with a partner. They also needed to complete an obstacle course whilst they were clothed. They were asked to swim non-stop for up to 5 minutes again. And we conducted a little quiz with them to see what knowledge they had about risks and emergency procedures. And finally, we got them to do an underwater swim for about 6 meters to try and retrieve a submerged object. There's a busy slide here, and I don't intend you to try to take everything from it. But notice the red bars. These are the participants who could complete the task without any assistance. For all 6 of these skills, at the beginning, less than 50% of the children were fully competent. In other words, they couldn't achieve these tasks without some help. There was wide variation, as I mentioned, the beginning in terms of competency across the group, but the majority, by the end of the programme, were able to complete the tasks without help or assistance. Encouragingly, significant improvements in 5 out of 6 of these tasks by post-test, and that in fact increased to all 6 tasks by the end of a 3-month retention test, where about 3/4 of the children were now fully competent. We were overwhelmed by these results and overwhelmed by the response of both the children and some of the caregivers. We asked the caregivers what they thought, because they were, of course, talking to their children whilst they were involved in the programme. And here are some of their thoughts and comments. We asked them, is your child more aware of dangers now around natural water environments? Does your child have a greater understanding of how to keep safe when in different water environments? Does your child, have they improved their swimming ability? And has your child improved important water safety survival skills? And you can see overwhelmingly that most of the caregivers agreed with those statements. So we were very happy with the programme and its impact upon the children. And importantly, that programme's been fed back to Water Safety New Zealand and is incorporated in their new nationwide programme, Water Skills for Life. So this 1 week, remember, just 1 week, open water programme was successful in improving and maintaining water safety competency. Some considerations maybe to think about format, content, location, where swimming teaching should happen. What it suggests to me is one area where we can perhaps have a real impact is in school camps, where children are often taken into lakes, rivers, and other open water environments. We only tested these children, recall, in swimming pools, and we need to do more research just to confirm, as I suspect, that the transferability of these skills is there. Those are some of the next steps for the next coming years. The key question I originally posed in the title asks whether children are physically educated for the 21st century. And whilst the future is, of course, uncertain, the literature on education and employment trends suggests that the idea of a single, long-lasting career or speciality in something or other may become a thing of the past. One way to think about jobs, for example, in the 21st century is to use the metaphor of a surfer. We catch a good wave or we find a good job early in our lives, but it may be short-lived, and as it crests and falls, we need to look for the next wave. We need to paddle out, back and find a new wave. We need to gain new skills and new experiences. We need to retrain and educate ourselves along the way. Even experts today are finding themselves disrupted. Fewer professions today are hotter than that of a software engineer, for example. Yet many foresee automation taking over the work of coding in the near future. Artificial intelligence is doing the rote work of lawyers. It's simplifying the work of doctors. And it's changing skills in jobs right through from truck drivers to financial analysts. Hence, in the 21st century, it's predicted that the workforce will need to learn, and they'll need to learn quickly. They'll need to adapt their skills and become more multidisciplinary in their expertise. The physical education curriculum at Otago was recently restructured with some of these future-focused graduate attributes in mind. Because speed learning is upon us, like it or not. Learning new skills typically takes a long time, but sometimes it's necessary to speed up that process. Learning complex motor skills which are difficult to automate. Sometimes we need to recover from injury or from disease, and we need to relearn skills. And evolving technologies are empowering rapid learning, and this is a fascinating field of research to be involved with. I want to return as well to the idea of physical literacy, which I mentioned obviously earlier in the talk, and how it's important for the 21st century. Several authors have written about physical literacy and linked it to the importance of being active in our natural environments. This nice quote is lifted from a very good book, if you've never read it, Last Child in the Woods, which suggests that the generation of children that are growing up today have less exposure to nature. And they even talk about a concept or idea called nature deficit disorder. I think children need opportunities to be active, to play and to discover how to move. And it's a shame that maybe they're playing more organised sports, they're playing more inside, in some cases even in virtual worlds. The reason I think that's a shame is the natural environment offers an abundance of opportunities and benefits to learn. So some of the key messages I'd like you to take home from today are that children should learn foundational aquatic skills based on the common causes of drowning. And that's something that I'm committed to pursuing whilst I'm here in New Zealand. Practicing aquatic skills in a pool is typically just the start of our learning journey, but it doesn't fully develop skill transfer. Motor learning principles can be used to design rich practice environments in physical education lessons. And I urge you, with your children and your friends, to think about exposing learners to a range of practice environments if you wish to optimize their transfer of athletic skill. So are our children physically educated for the 21st century? Drum roll for the big answer. There's large variation. I think some aren't, but in fact some probably are, particularly in a country like New Zealand. I think, and it's a big if, hence why I've made the font on my screen here as big as they can for ifs. If they can develop physical literacy through play and they're interacting sufficiently with nature, and if they learn to love physical activity, sport and exercise, then yes, they may well be physically educated for the 21st century. But beware if they're not. Well, that's the end of the formal part of this talk. I want to say a few thank yous for people who mean a lot to me and who've supported me in this little journey, as Richard said, from the Honiton of the north to Dunedin of the south. And first of all, I'll call out the members of the School of Physical Education, Sport and Exercise Sciences. I've never met a group of more passionate, more intelligent, and fantastic people to work with and for, whether it's staff, whether it's students, researchers, educators. They're an incredible bunch of people, and I'm truly, truly honoured to be able to represent them. So thank you to all of your support from the school. Thank you also to my research collaborators, people from across the world as well as from here as well. And in particular to the two fellows at the top who started it all, Professor Keith Davids and Professor Simon Bennett, my PhD supervisors from Manchester. These were the people that set me off on this path, and I feel, again, truly grateful for the opportunities that their wisdom and their support has provided me. Nothing ever happens on your own in research, and I've been fortunate again to share and cross paths with so many wonderful postgraduate students, and some of them are here today. And in recent years, I've been working particularly hard to bring more postgraduate students into the school. So I'm really pleased to see some fantastic new talent here, which will be doing exactly what I'm doing in a few years' time. Richard briefly alluded to a passion of mine. As well as my family here, I have another whānau, and they're the football whānau that live and grow with me, and on Saturday afternoons occasionally run around, sweat, and occasionally swear at each other. Some of these people are very young, as you can see, and some of them are extremely old. Some of them should not be running around a football pitch, but they still do that, and I'm so pleased that they do, because I get a lot of fun and enjoyment out of playing with them. And those that are circled may be particularly familiar to university staff here. I've poached the talent from the university. I don't know if there's any more talent available, but if there is, I will try to find it. So thanks to my football whānau, but most importantly, thanks to the whānau that mean the most to me. My parents, my family back home in the UK, who I don't see as regularly as I would wish to, and of course Angela and Melanie here with me on a trip recently to the Commonwealth Games. Since I've been to New Zealand, I've been very fortunate to be adopted by another set of grandparents or parents, Paddy and Mary, who've looked after me whilst I was here on my own without my wife. So again, I want to send out big thanks, big love to all of the family who've helped me from the very start, helped me realize just how important physical education can be. I'll leave you with one of my favorite quotes about teaching, which I think says an awful lot. Thanks for listening. Ngā mihi nui ki a koe. Thank you very much.
Don't need to look quite so relieved, Chris. Kia ora, good evening. My name is Ken Hodge, and it's my honour to thank Chris for his presentation. Normally this task will be completed by the head of department, or in our case, the dean of the school. But as you heard earlier from Richard, Chris is the dean of our school, so it's my task to offer the thanks for Chris's provocative talk. A couple of personal things that really hit home from what Chris said. Many of you who are New Zealanders like me grew up learning to swim in school pools and learning almost drowning in Southern rivers and other places. Unfortunately, I had some friends pass away from preventable drowning, so that hits home. Very important part of life in New Zealand on an island with so many lakes and rivers. When I was privileged enough to be on the Board of Trustees for my kids' primary school at McAndrew Bay, we fought hard to retain our school pool, and a lot of fundraising went into that and a lot of effort. So thank you very much for the work you're putting into that important topic, Chris. I think you'll agree Chris's presentation was quite provocative at times about the physical activity, or more accurately, physical inactivity of most people in the developed world, which is a sad fact of modern life. But it's even more important now given the health issues that confront all of us. So I think some of the work that Chris talked about is absolutely crucial for us. I just want to say a couple of things to thank Chris as a colleague. We've been colleagues since 2003 when Chris joined the staff at the school. We've done a little bit of research together. We've done some teaching together. I haven't played football, but maybe your speed learning thing could help me with my golfing competence, because I'm not learning that sport very quickly at all. Chris has been the dean, I think, for almost exactly 2 years, as of today or tomorrow. And he could not have taken over those reins in more challenging circumstances. Many of you will know, but some of you won't. 2-3 years ago, our school went through a massive change, both in terms of our curriculum, our degrees, and some staff turnover, and it was a very difficult and painful period for us. So Chris took over in a very difficult time, and he has done an outstanding job as our dean, and we're very grateful. He's been a great leader. He's pissed a few people off, and I mean that as a compliment. Seriously, because if you don't take hard decisions, you don't actually get things to move along. And hard decisions usually have some people who weren't agreeing with you a little annoyed. And I was one of those at a few times. But I appreciate that Chris was brave enough, strong enough of a leader to actually do those things and help our school progress in very difficult circumstances. We're extremely grateful, Chris, for all of that. All it leaves me now is to present a little gift that I prepared earlier. Chris.
Thank you.
And to thank all of you for attending, some of my colleagues and other folks I recognise from around campus, and also from the Dunedin community, and especially Chris's family and extended family and folks who are watching from over the water. So those of you who are here, the virtual people can have a virtual drink for Chris, but we're going to adjourn over to the staff club now, the ground floor of the staff club, for some refreshments. So please feel welcome to join us over there to share your thoughts on Chris's talk and other things. Thank you very much for attending this evening.